Hello everyone, I'm Ron and today Robin and I are going to show you how to remove your old kitchen countertops and install new ones. Now whether you're upgrading your space or replacing damaged countertops, we'll walk you through this process step by step.
We'll cover everything from removing your existing countertop, cutting and joining the new one, installing the sink, finishing the edges and backsplash. By the end of this workshop, you'll have all the information needed to complete your project with confidence.
Now we're also going to cover different types of countertops as well as the tools and materials you'll need to complete this project. And before we go, we're going to answer some frequently asked questions and provide you a full summary of what we've learned today.
Plus, we'll share tips, tricks, and common mistakes to avoid.
This project takes time, patience, and a lot of planning. Home Depot offers installation services with cabinet purchases, so if you'd rather have a professional handle the job, just head to homedepot.com and find it under the Services tab.
You can also speak with a store associate about installation services if you want to learn more. However, for this project, we're going to show you that you can tackle this on your own.
Well, with a little bit of help, of course.
Oh, absolutely. This is definitely a two-person job. Having an extra set of hands is always beneficial with any type of how-to project.
Now, before we jump into removing that old countertop, let's talk safety. Always remember to wear safety goggles and gloves when handling tools, and it's always a good idea to wear a dust mask when you're doing any type of demo, because it can be very dusty. Now, before we start, we need to remember to prep the space. This step might not seem the most exciting, but it is crucial for keeping your work area safe and organized.
Exactly, Ron. Start by clearing everything off your counters. That means small appliances, dishes, and anything that could get in the way or get damaged during the removal. You'd be surprised how easy it is to accidentally drop a hammer in a toaster. It's also a good idea to take everything out of your lower cabinets as well.
Now let's talk about the plumbing. You're going to need to turn off the water supply before we remove the sink and faucet. Look under your sink, you should see two shutoff valves, one for hot, one for cold. Turn them both counterclockwise until they stop. Don't forget the dishwasher if you have one. That water supply will need to be shut off as well.
Right. Once the water is off, open up your faucet to relieve any pressure still in the lines. This will prevent any unexpected sprays when we disconnect the pipes. There still may be some water in the lines, so you might want to have a bucket or some old rags or towels at the ready.
Now that's a good call.
Mhm.
Now if you have that garbage disposal, you're going to need to unplug it. Now most disposals have a simple plug under the sink, but if yours is hardwired, you may need to shut off the breaker at that outlet.
And if you're not sure which breaker it is, I recommend labeling them for future projects. Trust me, you'll thank yourself later. If you're not sure how, you may want to check out our Electrical Basics workshop that goes over labeling your breaker box. Before removing the countertop, disconnect the drain and water supply lines. This makes the removal process much easier and prevents any accidental leaks or water spills while you're working. And again, be sure to have that bucket or towel handy in case of any residual water that might remain in the pipes.
Absolutely. Now instead of struggling with the faucet and the sink from underneath, keep them intact for now.
Mhm.
Once the countertop is off, you can flip it over and remove them easily if you plan to reuse them. Once flipped, all you need to do is then score the caulking around the edge of the sink basin and then lift it out. If the faucet is stained, you can also clean off any old sealant at this stage before installing or reinstalling.
Now, exactly. After disconnecting the plumbing, check under the counter for screws or brackets securing the countertop to the cabinets. These fasteners are typically located along the cabinet frame near the back or under the sink area. Use a drill or screwdriver to remove them, working methodically to avoid damaging the cabinetry.
Now it's time to free the countertop itself. First, score the caulk all the way around the edges of the counter and the backsplash. You're going to want to score both the top and the bottom. Check underneath for screws and brackets attaching the counter to the cabinet. Grab a drill or a screwdriver and remove them.
Now, some countertops may also be glued down. If that's the case, take a pry bar and gently work it along the edges to loosen the adhesive. Go slow to avoid damaging your cabinets. You may find an oscillating tool with a cutting blade helpful to cut through the adhesive. Just go slow as to not to damage those cabinets.
Man, Ron, I gotta tell you, Robin, I'm so happy that the countertop that we removed wasn't glued to the cabinets. It can be a little bit more difficult to do that, but like she said earlier, you just gotta take your time and get it done. Once the countertop is free, it's time to lift it off. This part can be tricky, so it's best to have a helping hand because countertops can be heavy and awkward to handle.
Right. When lifting, use a steady motion and watch for any sections still attached. If it's a large counter, you may need to cut it into smaller pieces with a circular saw or reciprocating saw for easier removal.
And there you have it, the old countertop is out. Now, once you've removed that old countertop, you'll need to decide how to dispose of it properly. If it's in decent condition, consider donating it to the local Habitat for Humanity, Restore, or similar organization. They might be able to reuse it.
Yeah, that's a great option. But if it's too damaged, check with your local waste management service to see if they accept construction debris. Some areas require countertops to be taken to a special disposal site, especially if they contain materials like laminate or stone. If you're dealing with a really large or heavy piece, renting a dumpster or scheduling a bulk pickup might be the easiest solution. Now that we have a clean slate, let's talk about this countertop that we're installing.
Now we're working with a laminate countertop. This is Roca Bosco Gray, which is a great choice for a few reasons. First, it's affordable, making it a solid option if you want a fresh look without breaking the bank. Second, laminate has come a long way over the years. It's durable than ever. It resists stains and is super easy to clean. Plus, the Roca Bosco pattern gives it a high-end stone-like appearance without the weight or the cost of real granite or quartz.
Now, if you'll notice with this piece here, it's got all kinds of veining and marbling in it to really give it that natural stone look without it actually being stone. So you don't have the weight or the cost of natural stone. Some materials like quartz or granite require professional installation because they're so heavy and need special tools to cut and polish. But laminate, you can cut it with standard tools, and installation is a lot more forgiving.
Exactly. Now, while solid stone options may need to be sealed regularly to prevent staining, laminate is non-porous, so you don't have to worry about spills soaking and causing permanent damage. A quick wipe with a damp cloth usually is all it takes to keep it looking great.
Now, another thing I love about laminate countertops is the variety of styles and edge profiles you can choose from. Now, this one has a modern, like half rounded edge, but there are so many different profiles. Normally, the laminate that we think of, grandma's laminate, always had that straight boxed edge, but we have so many different profiles now. You can get far more decorative profiles like this. You can get straighter edges. You can get a softer rounding here where it's not quite as curved, right? But it's just a little bit curved. So you don't have that traditional seam line across the front that you used to have with laminate. There's tons of different choices. So this isn't the same laminate countertop from the 70s or 80s. The ones with the obvious seams and fake looking patterns. The patterns have come a long way too. We have different patterns that look and sometimes even feel like stone or wood, and they have some texture to them and a lot of different color options and texture options.
I could tell you all I remember is growing up, the glossy yellow
Yellow.
countertop that we had in my mother's
Yep.
house, in my house.
That was always the one, right? So this is, a lot of these new ones really look more expensive, but it's one of the most budget-friendly options that you can make.
Right, and that brings us to another big change that we're making in this kitchen. We're upgrading the sink from that double basin sink to a single that's going to be 9 inches deep.
Right? That is a smart choice because laminate countertops are typically designed for drop-in sinks. Installation is simple, unlike an undermount sink, which requires cutting and sealing the raw edges of stone or quartz. A drop in sink sits right on top of the countertop, making it a perfect match for this material.
Yep.
Mhm.
So between the durability, the affordability, the easy maintenance, this countertop is a do-it-yourself friendly project to refresh your kitchen.
Yeah. And if you're wondering about other materials like granite, quartz, butcher block, or solid surface countertops, don't worry about it. We'll talk about those a little bit later in the workshop.
Hey, so let's talk about storage.
Yeah.
When you purchase your countertop, chances are you're not going to immediately install it. Once you receive it, it's important to store it properly before you install it to prevent warping, damage, or moisture absorption. Now, first, you're going to want to, keep it flat and supported. Laminate countertops can flex, right, if left leaning against the wall.
Mhm.
Now, you don't want to cause any kind of bowing or cracking, so instead you're going to want to lay it flat. Keep it on a stable surface like a pair of sawhorses or across a set of cabinets. Now, if you have to store it standing up or vertically due to space, make sure that it is fully supported along its entire length, not just resting on one end.
Right. Now, temperature and humidity also matter. Avoid storing it in extreme temperatures or in a damp area like a garage or basement. Laminate countertops can absorb moisture from the air, which could cause swelling or damage to the particle board core. Instead, keep it indoors in a dry, temperature controlled space, ideally where it'll be installed so it can acclimate to the environment.
Another big thing is keep it protected. Leave it in its original packaging for as long as possible to prevent any scratches or dings. If you've already removed it from its packaging, cover it with a moving blanket or a sheet of cardboard to protect the surface.
Now, just one more tip. Avoid stacking heavy objects on top of it. Even though laminate is durable, too much weight can cause it to warp over time. So just make sure it's lying flat in a dry area and ready to go for installation day.
Okay, so when measuring for the new countertop, precision is key. Even a small miscalculation can throw off the entire fit, especially with an L-shaped layout like the one we're going to be doing.
Now, in this kitchen, we'll begin with the longest section of the countertop along the back wall. Measure from the far left end to the far right end along the back edge. This comes to 113 inches. Next, measure the left side section along the back wall, and this one's 47 inches. These two sections form the L shape, and we need to ensure that they meet seamlessly in the corner.
Now for the width, which is the depth of the countertop from the front to the back. We measured the wall from the outer edge of the cabinets. The standard width is 25 inches, which allows for a slight overhang beyond the cabinets. However, the inside corner where the two countertop slabs will meet, the depth measures slightly different at 22 and 7/8 inches due to the angle of the L shape. This is an important detail because it ensures that the two sections of the countertop align properly in the corners without any gaps.
Yeah, that's right. We also need to measure the inside front edge of the L shape to confirm the fit. This runs along the front face of the cabinets and measures at 89 and 3/8 inches. Once the perimeter is mapped out, don't forget to account for the overhang. A standard overhang is about 1.5 inches, meaning the countertop extends slightly past the cabinet edges for both function and aesthetics. This overhang should be consistent across all edges for a uniform look.
Now, when we were filming this, the countertop pieces we received were 8 feet and 12 feet long. They were way bigger than what we needed for this kitchen. So, before we could even think about installing them, we had to trim them down the size.
Yeah, and let me tell you, maneuvering a 12-foot countertop through a doorway is no joke. I felt like we were trying to fit a sofa through a doggy door.
Yeah, right, that's for sure. It was like a real life game of Tetris. But That's why it's a good idea to pre-cut your pieces to a more manageable size before bringing them inside. We made rough cuts first so you could dry fit the pieces and mark exactly where our cuts would need to be in the final cut.
And dry fitting is key. It lets us double check that everything's lined up before making any permanent cuts. Because once you cut too short, well, there's no undo button for that.
Exactly. Measure twice, cut once, but even better, dry fit first. It'll save you a ton of headaches.
Yeah, and before we made our final cuts, we took an extra step to keep the laminate from splintering. We put a piece of painter's tape right over the cut line.
Yep, that tape helps hold the laminate together so it doesn't chip or splinter while you're cutting it. Now, once the tape is in place, use a straight edge or a carpenter square to mark the precise cutting line right on top of the tape.
Right. Now, for the cutting, we used a circular saw with a fine-tooth blade specifically designed for cutting laminate. If you're using a standard blade, you're more likely to chip the laminate, so make sure you have the right blade for the job.
And here's a tip. Cut slowly. Let the saw do the work. Don't force it or push too hard because that can create rough edges. A steady, controlled pace gives you the cleanest cut.
You know, one other thing that I noticed when we were cutting, it's best if you have a second person that can support the piece that you're cutting off, because we found that it doesn't take a lot with the weight of that laminate to pinch your blade a little bit and either stop the blade or you kind of get that smoking, almost burning on the edge of it. So the more support you can give around the cut so that it doesn't kind of fold in on itself, great option. And if you want to be extra careful, you can flip the countertop over and cut from the backside. You should still tape the face of the laminate, even if you're cutting through the back.
Now, once the cut is done, peel off that excess painter's tape and you should have a nice clean edge ready for installation. Now that we have our rough cut countertop pieces, it's time to join them together. If you have a straight piece, it may just slide right into place. But for an L-shaped countertop like ours, we'll need to create a seam where the two pieces meet.
That's right. Before we start securing anything, we need to dry fit the countertop pieces again to make sure everything lines up. That dry fitting just means placing the pieces on top of the cabinets without attaching them, just to double check that fit.
Now, if there is any small gaps where the pieces meet, now is the time to make adjustments. Oftentimes, walls aren't perfectly square, so you may need to shave down the edge of the countertop a bit.
Right. A good trick is to use a scrap piece of wood to trace along the wall if you notice any gaps or uneven spots. You can mark those on the countertop and trim it down slightly with a jigsaw or sand it smooth.
Now, once your countertop pieces fit nicely together, take a pencil and lightly mark on the wall where they're going to meet. This will help you know exactly where to realign them later when we apply the adhesive.
Now, there are a few different ways to join countertop pieces together. Some countertops come with laminate joining bolts, which are tightened underneath the countertop to pull those pieces together. Others require biscuit joints or dowels for added strength. These specific countertops have pre-cut miters that come together to form the L shape of our kitchen.
Now, the key to a strong joint is using the right glue and that miter bolt kit. That glue bonds the pieces together and allows the miter bolts to pull them in tight, creating a flush, seamless connection. Now, if you've ever wondered how laminate countertop corners look so clean, this is why.
So here's what we did. First, we flipped the countertop pieces upside down on a flat surface. Working from the bottom gives you easier access to install those miter bolts.
We lined our miter cuts up and applied a generous amount of glue along the joint. Now, you're going to want to make sure it's evenly spread so there are no gaps.
Next, we inserted the miter bolts into the pre-drilled slots on the underside of the countertop. If your countertop doesn't come with these pre-drilled holes, you'll need to follow the manufacturer's guidelines for spacing and drilling them yourself.
Now, we tightened the bolts in stages, working from one side to the other, making sure the pieces were pulling together evenly. You do not want to over tighten too fast because you could cause uneven pressure, which might lead to a slight lip up of the joint.
Yeah. Once the pieces were securely joined, we wiped away any of the excess adhesive before it could dry from around the seam. Then came the tricky part, hoisting it over and flipping it back onto the cabinets.
Yes, yes, yes. That was definitely a two-person job. These countertops are heavy and awkward to handle, so having that second pair of hands makes all the difference. We carefully lifted and flipped it over and fit it into place on the cabinets.
Yeah, one of the reasons for that is, our pieces, although they were big, they still weren't huge. If you had two really large pieces, you may have to fit them first and then do the bolts from underneath. And that corner, a lot of times, is really hard to get back into depending on what your cabinetry looks like. So it's going to depend on what your cabinet system looks like as to whether you want to do it face up. Anytime you could do anything face up without having to climb into the cabinet, it's gonna make it a lot easier, okay? But, otherwise, you may have to get under there to do it if your pieces are just too big to turn back over once they're connected. So, if you're installing those laminate countertops with an angled seam, just remember to take your time. Use a good adhesive and tighten those miter bolts evenly for the best result.
Now that we have our measurements, we've dry fit, we've secured the miter, we're ready to make our final cuts. Use that straight edge and the pencil to draw them out clearly.
Now, before you cut, remember to place that painter's tape along the cut line. It's going to help reduce that chipping and give you a much cleaner edge.
Now for straight cuts, we used a circular saw with a fine tooth blade. Now make sure your counter is fully supported for cutting. If it's hanging off the edge of your work area, clamp it down or add a temporary support underneath it.
Yeah, once you finish your cuts, you can use a sanding block to smooth out the edges. And then it's time to secure the countertops to the cabinet. We'll be using L brackets and screws to hold the countertop in place, making sure everything stays rock solid.
Now before we attach anything, we need to check that the countertops are perfectly level. Even if your cabinets look flat, there may be slight variations that could cause gaps or uneven seams, and this is where shims come into play.
Exactly. Shims are thin, wedge-shaped pieces, usually wood or plastic, that help level out any uneven spots. Before securing the countertop, we slide a shim under any areas where there's a small gap between the cabinet frame and the countertop base.
Now to check for gaps, place a level across the surface of the countertop. Look along the back edge where it meets the wall and along the front to see if there are any low spots. If the bubble in the level isn't centered, it means the countertop needs some adjustment.
Now, if you found a low spot, slide a shim under the countertop until the level shows it's even. Once it's in the right spot, you can trim off the excess shim so it doesn't stick out from underneath the counter.
Now, once everything is level, it's time to secure the countertop. Like Robin said earlier, we're using L brackets, which will allow us to anchor the countertop to the cabinet frame from underneath.
Right. These L brackets get screwed into the underside of the countertop and into the cabinet frame. You want to place them near the back wall and along the sides for extra support. If you're working with a long countertop run, space them about 12 to 18 inches apart for even distribution.
Now, using a drill, we drive the screws just enough to hold the countertop in place securely, but not so tight as that it pulls the countertop down unevenly. If you notice a tiny gap in the seam after tightening, you can use a color-matched seam filler to make it blend in perfectly. Smooth it with your finger or a putty knife, then wipe off any excess.
Now, if you're working with a heavy countertop like a quartz or a granite, you'll need to use construction adhesive or silicone instead of screws. Apply a few beads of adhesive along the top edges of the cabinets before placing the countertop down. As a final check, run your hand along the countertop to make sure everything feels stable, that there's no wobbling or gaps, just a solid, level installation. And that's it. With the countertop shimmed, leveled, and secured to the cabinets, we're ready to move on to installing the sink.
Now, before you start cutting, make sure to double check the sink template. Most sinks come with a paper or cardboard template that shows you exactly where to cut. Trace the template, then use painter's tape to cover the cut lines, and then trace the template again over the tape. This will help prevent chipping when you cut the hole for your sink.
Now, let's talk about the sink cutout. The sink we're installing is 33 inches wide and 22 inches long, so we need to mark this precisely to fit the new countertop. Measure and mark the center point of the base cabinet where the sink will be installed. From there, measuring out 16.5 inches to each side to get the total 33-inch width. Then measure from the back wall to position the sink from front to back. Typically, sinks are centered about 2 inches back from the front edge of the countertop to allow for a comfortable work area. And it's a good idea to double check that the sink placement aligns with the plumbing connections underneath. If the new sink is deeper than the old one, like this one is, which is 9 inches deep, make sure there's enough clearance inside the cabinet for the drain, the garbage disposal. Drill a pilot hole at each corner inside the marked area. This gives your jigsaw a starting point and room to turn your corners.
Now, using your jigsaw with a fine-tooth blade, cut along the pencil line. Go slow and let the saw do the work. Don't force it. And here's a great tip. Cut two opposite sides of the sinkhole, then add a piece of scrap wood to the center of the sink area that spans to the outside cuts. You can screw it right into the center of the piece that you're going to be cutting out. This will hold the piece of laminate in place while you're cutting so it does not pinch the blade as we're making those last cuts. You can then remove it and pull it out by the scrap wood. Let's dry fit the sink next to make sure it fits properly. Carefully lowering it into place and check that it is leveled and centered.
If the sink isn't sitting flush, you may need to sand or trim a little more around the opening, but ours looks good, so we're ready to seal it. First, you want to seal the cut edge of the wood. Just add a thick bead of silicone on the raw wood and use your finger or a putty knife to coat the wood, preventing moisture from getting into the press board and swelling around the sink. While that's setting, it'll be easier to install the faucet and drain before the final sink installation. We have another great workshop on installing a sink that you could check out for more details.
Now, Robin, before we move on, everybody out there is probably thinking to yourself, why did we just do that? Well, you said, well, because we don't want any water to be exposed and we don't want any swelling in the press board.
Right.
And you're probably thinking, well, if I'm sealing this all up, how am I going to get water on there? It's not about the water, ladies and gentlemen. It's about the moisture in the air. Your kitchen is a very moist place.
Right.
So it's about what's in the air, not actual water per se. It's kind of like the humidity and the moisture that's in the air can still get in to that rough cut sink, causing it to swell up. Absolutely. So now we're going to want to grab that caulk gun. We're going to apply a generous bead of silicone around the edge of the opening, about 1/4 of an inch thick. You want to be consistent, but not too thick, or it will ooze out when you drop the sink in. You can also add a bead of silicone to the underside of the sink as well.
Now you want to carefully lower the sink into place and press down evenly to ensure a good seal. Wipe away any excess silicone with a damp cloth.
Now, once the sink is seated, you may need to install mounting clips underneath it to keep it secured. Now, these clips attach to the underside of the counter and tighten to hold the sink in place.
Slide each clip into position along the edge of the sink and then tighten them with a screwdriver or drill. Make sure they're snug, but don't over tighten. However, this sink did not have mounting clips, so make sure to check the manufacturer's instructions on the best way to secure your sink.
If you're reinstalling a garbage disposal, follow the manufacturer's instructions to attach it to the drain. Now that everything is in place, it's time to reconnect the P-trap and water lines. Since we went from a double bowl to a single bowl, we only need one tailpiece to connect it to the P-trap.
Make sure everything is hand tight before using a wrench to give it a final snug turn.
Once everything is reconnected, turn the water back on slowly and check for leaks. Run the faucet for a few minutes and check the underside of the sink or underneath the sink.
Right. If you notice any drips, tighten the connections slightly, wipe them dry before testing again.
Now, if you're looking for a more detailed step-by-step process on how to install the plumbing, we have several workshops available that will walk you through that process from start to finish.
Yep, we've got 3 great workshops on plumbing that you can find at homedepot.com/workshops. How to install a faucet, how to install a sink, and plumbing basics. We also have a great workshop on how to install a garbage disposal if you have one. Our customer workshop team is always here to lend a helping hand.
And that's it. The new sink is installed and ready to use. Now that our countertop is secured and our sink is in place, let's talk about some critical finishing details, the backsplash and the edges.
Yep. If you have a separate backsplash that's not attached to your countertop, you're going to measure and cut the backsplash pieces to length. Now remember, we have the measurements from before, so this will make life a lot easier. Mark the backsplash to the desired length, making sure that you have that painter's tape on there to prevent it from splintering.
Now, once the backsplash has been cut, you'll need to place construction adhesive on the back side and a bead of silicone along the bottom edge. Gently set the backsplash pieces into place and press firmly.
Now let's talk a little bit about the edging.
Yep, absolutely. Proper edging your countertop not only improves the appearance, but it also protects it from damage, moisture, and general wear and tear.
Yeah, that's right. And since we're working with a laminate countertop, we'll be applying a matching laminate edge strip. This edge strip covers the raw particle board or plywood underneath, giving that countertop a finished look.
Since the countertop is designed to be cut down, we don't have a solid edge that supports the full width of the edging. In this case, you can install wood filler strips. Measure them to the depth of your counter and cut to size.
Once the filler strips have been cut to size, run glue along the top side and adhere it to the underside of the countertop. Then drill pilot holes in the center and on the ends and screw them into place. The next step is measuring and cutting the strips to size. Grab a tape measure and measure the length of each exposed edge of your countertop.
Now, once you have your measurements, cut the edge of the strips slightly longer than you need because you can always trim that excess later. Use a utility knife or scissors to make that clean cut.
Right. Now, before applying the edge strip, you want to make sure that the edge of the countertop is clean and smooth. If there's any rough spots, use a fine grit sandpaper to lightly sand it down.
Next, we're going to apply the laminate edge strip using a heat-activated adhesive. This method makes the installation easier and avoids the need for traditional clamping methods.
That's right. The edge strip comes with a special pre-applied adhesive that reacts to heat. So instead of using contact cement, we're going to use an iron to melt the adhesive and bond it to the countertop edge.
Before we apply any heat, we need to position the laminate edging along the countertop edge, making sure that it lines up properly. Once we start applying the heat, it will bond quickly. So take that few extra seconds because this will ensure a perfect alignment because it is important.
Now grab a household iron and set it to medium heat. You don't want it too hot or it could scorch the laminate. Slowly run the iron along the edge strip, applying steady pressure. This activates the adhesive and melts it just enough to create a strong bond with the countertop.
Make sure to work in small sections rather than rushing through it all at one time. If you heat an area, immediately press down firmly with a block of wood or a roller to ensure a tight, even bond.
Now, if you would notice any spots where the edging isn't sticking well, go back over it with an iron and apply a little more pressure.
Now, once the edging is fully secured, let it cool for a few minutes. Then, if there's any excess material hanging over the edge, Use a file, a utility knife, or even a trim router to shave down it until it's flush with the countertop.
Wipe down the edge with a damp cloth to remove any residue from the heat-activated adhesive.
And just like that, we've got a seamless, professional looking edge without the need of a messy glues or clamps. Now next, we're going to seal the seams and the edges to protect them against any water damage.
Right. Sealing your countertop is an important final step. This helps protect the seams and edges from water damage, preventing issues like swelling or warping, especially with laminate and wood countertops.
Even if your countertop is water resistant, seams and edges can be vulnerable if water gets underneath the surface. It can cause swelling and mold growth. So just taking a few extra minutes to seal everything up will save you a lot of trouble down the road.
Yeah, we're going to start by applying a bead of silicone caulk where the countertop meets the wall or backsplash. This creates a watertight seal and prevents liquids from seeping behind your countertop.
Now when choosing a caulk, look for kitchen and bath silicone caulk that's mold and mildew resistant. It also helps to choose a color that matches your countertop or backsplash for a seamless look.
Before applying the caulk, make sure the area is clean and dry. Any dust or grease can prevent the caulk from sticking properly.
Cut the tip of the caulk tube at a 45-degree angle, making sure that the opening is just slightly bigger than the gap you're filling. Load the caulk into your caulk gun and slowly apply a steady bead along the seam.
To get a smooth finish, dip your finger in a little bit of soapy water and lightly run it along the caulk line to smooth it out. You can also use a caulk smoothing tool if you have one.
Wipe away any excess with a damp cloth before it dries. Then let the caulk set for the recommended drying time, usually 24 hours before exposing it to any water.
Now, if you have a seam where two countertop pieces meet, it's a good idea to apply a matching seam filler. This not only makes the seam less visible, but it also adds a layer of protection.
Absolutely. And those seam fillers, they can come in different colors to match your countertop. Apply a small amount directly to the seam, use a plastic putty knife or your finger to smooth it out.
Once it's dry, wipe off any excess and your countertop will look like one solid piece.
Now that everything is sealed and secured, the last thing to do is a final inspection. Run your hand along the edges, making sure that everything feels smooth and secure. Check all seams and make sure that they are sealed properly.
And don't forget to turn the water back on and test your sink for any leaks. Run the faucet for a few minutes and check underneath to make sure everything is dry.
And with that, our countertop installation is complete. It looks clean, professional, and most importantly, it is built to last.
Now that we've gone over the installation process, let's talk about the different types of countertops. Choosing the right material is just as important as installing it correctly. There are so many options out there, and each one has its own advantage and drawbacks.
Absolutely. And the best choice really depends on your budget, how much maintenance you're willing to do, and how you will use your kitchen. Let's start with one of the most common options, laminate.
So laminate has come a long way. A lot of people think those old school glossy surfaces from decades ago, but modern laminate can actually mimic the look of stone or wood for a fraction of the price.
Right. It's affordable, it's lightweight, it's easy to install, making it a great option for do-it-yourselfers. But laminate does have some downsides. It's not heat resistant, so you can't put a hot pan directly on it. It is also prone to scratches and chips. Once it's damaged, you can't really repair it. You'll have to replace the whole section.
Yeah, and if water gets into any of those chips or seams, it can cause the particle board underneath to swell. So while laminate is great for budget-friendly remodels, it's not the most durable option. So let's talk about one of the most popular choices these days, quartz.
I love some quartz. It's an engineered stone, meaning it's made from crushed quartz mixed with resins. Its big selling point is that it's non-porous, so that it won't stain and it doesn't need to be sealed like natural stone.
Yeah, and that's a huge plus for busy kitchens. It resists stains from things like wine, coffee, and juice, which makes it a great option for families. And because it's man made, it comes in a wide variety of colors and patterns. The only real downside is that it's a bit expensive and not quite as heat resistant as granite.
Right. It can handle the normal, heat from the normal kitchen temperatures,
Yeah.
but, if you put a real hot pan directly on it, the resin can scorch or even crack.
Mhm.
So if you go with quartz, always make sure that you're using some form of a hot pad.
Yeah. Now, speaking of heat resistance, let's talk about granite. Granite is a natural stone, so every slab is unique and it's incredibly durable. It's heat resistant, scratch resistant, and it adds a high end look to any kitchen.
But it does require maintenance.
Mhm.
Granite is porous. It needs to be sealed regularly to prevent stains. If you spill something acidic on it, like lemon juice, it can seep into the stone and leave a mark.
Yeah. And it's also really heavy, which means your cabinets need to be strong enough to support it. So if you're installing granite, it's usually best to have professionals handle it, since cutting and sealing it correctly takes some experience.
Now, that's true for other natural stones as well, like marble. Marble is stunning, but it's a lot softer than granite,
Mhm.
so it scratches and it can stain easily. So if you want a high-end look but don't mind the upkeep, it's a great option. But it's not the most practical for high-traffic kitchens.
No, it's perfect for things like baking stations because it's a little bit cooler and that cool surface is great for rolling out dough. So if you're a baker, marble could be worth considering.
It's funny, Robin, is I never even knew that.
Mm.
I didn't know that about marble. And I always wondered, why are rolling pins at home always marble?
Mhm.
And now it's all come together for
The
me.
weight and the coolness makes it all
All come
easier.
together. That's
All
right.
come together.
That's right. So another popular choice is butcher block. It gives you that warm, natural look to a kitchen and is great for a working surface for, like, say, chopping and food prep.
Yeah, the downside is that wood is very porous, so it has to be sealed regularly to prevent stains and bacteria buildup. It also scratches and dents pretty easily, but the nice thing is that you can sand it down and refinish it.
Exactly. It's one of the few countertop materials out there today that you can actually repair yourself. Now, if you want something industrial or ultra modern, stainless steel is the option for you.
Yeah, it's what you see in restaurant kitchens because it's heat resistant, non porous, and super easy to clean. But in a home kitchen, it can feel a little cold, and it shows fingerprints and water spots pretty easily.
And it also scratches over time, but some people actually dig that one look.
Mhm.
On the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got concrete countertops, which have, a really modern custom feel.
Yeah, concrete is a great because you can shape it into any size or style. It can be dyed or stained in different colors, but it does require sealing to prevent staining. You can develop small cracks over time, especially if it isn't reinforced properly.
And also it's one of the heaviest
Mhm.
options. So your cabinets need to be able to handle that weight or you need to reinforce them. And since it's a custom pour, it's not the easiest to protect.
Yeah, that's kind of makes it a little more complicated for a DIY project. It definitely is best left to those professionals unless you have experience working with concrete. So when choosing a countertop, it really comes down to your lifestyle, how much maintenance you're willing to do, and how expensive it is.
And you know what? That's the key takeaway here. If you want something low maintenance, quartz is a great choice. If you're looking all about durability, granite might be the way to go. If you like the warmth of natural wood, butcher block could be a great fit. Remember, every material has its pros and cons, so think about how you use your kitchen before making a decision.
And of course, that budget plays a huge role. Some of these materials can be quite an investment, while others are more budget friendly. The good news is that there's an option for every style and price point.
Exactly. Now, hopefully, the breakdown that we've given you helps you decide which countertop is right for your kitchen. Whatever you choose, just make sure to install it properly, maintain it well, and it will last for years to come.
Now, before we wrap up for the day, let's quickly go over the tools and materials you'll need for this project. We have an entire list of tools, but I just kind of want to point out some of the most important ones. We've talked about the saws that we've used, right? So we had a jigsaw and a circular saw. Those are very important to have, but even more important, again, are those blades. Make sure the blades you have are designed to cut the material you're using, right? So if you're doing butcher block, you want a fine finish wood blade. If you're going to do laminate like we did, you want to make sure you have a blade designed for laminate. Those are probably going to be your most important tools for sure.
Now, there are some materials that you're going to need as well. Now, we discussed quite a bit of different materials that are out there because we want to make sure that this goes off seamless, right? So we want to think about, number one, the type of laminate that you're choosing. You want to think about the laminate edging kit,
Mhm.
those different things. Think about the sink and the faucet that you're going to be installing because you want to make sure that you don't get that sink too big for that actual cabinet base as well.
Mhm.
Make sure those mounting brackets are there and the screws that can utilize. You don't want too big a screw because you don't want it coming up through the countertop.
No.
So make sure you're taking all those things in consideration as well.
Absolutely. You can find a full list of tools and materials in the resource guide linked below. Now that we've gone over those tools and materials, let's answer a few frequently asked questions that we get from customers. So, Ron, can I install a new countertop without removing an existing one?
In most cases, it's always best to remove the old countertop. First, to ensure a secure fit and a proper installation. Removing the existing countertop allows you to check the condition of the cabinets and maybe what's behind the backsplash as well.
Mhm.
If everything is level, it helps prevent issues like uneven surfaces or old adhesive interfering with the installation.
Mm.
But that being said, there are overlay systems designed to go directly over an existing countertop. These include laminate overlays, quartz or granite overlay systems, and even concrete resurfacing kits. Now, these options can work well if your current countertops are in good condition, meaning they are structurally sound, level, and free of water damage or warping. However, if your existing countertops have any damage, unlevelness, or weak spots, unevenness, an overlay may amplify those flaws rather than hide them. Plus, overlays can increase the thickness of the countertop, which can affect how appliances, backsplash, and sink fit. So before deciding, take a close look at your current countertop and consider long-term durability. If you want the best, most secure installation, removing the old countertop first is the recommended approach. So Robin, here's one for you.
Mhm.
How do I know if my cabinets can support a heavier countertop?
Yeah, that's a great question because certain countertop materials like the quartz, granite, or concrete are much heavier than laminate or wood. So if your cabinets aren't strong enough, they may sag over time or even fail under the weight. To check your cabinet structure, look for the following things. First of all, the cabinet material. Solid wood or high quality plywood can generally support heavier countertops. Particle board or MDF, that medium density fiberboard, may need reinforcement as these materials can break down under excessive weight. You also want to see if you have a frameless or a framed cabinet. Framed cabinets with a solid wood front frame tend to be stronger than frameless designs, which rely entirely on panel construction. Frameless may need reinforcement if installing heavy stone. You want to check for the thickness of the cabinet walls. Cabinet side panels should be at least a ½ inch thick. Thinner materials may require additional support, so check for support beams or brackets inside the cabinets, especially under long sections or overhangs. For stone countertops, you may need to add L brackets or extra plywood reinforcements. You want to check for the levelness of your cabinets, right? We always want our cabinets, our countertops level, but heavy countertops need to be perfectly level to sit on. Uneven cabinets create stress points, which may lead to cracks in materials like granite or quartz over time. If you're unsure, it's a good idea to have a professional inspect your cabinets or add reinforcements before installing a heavy countertop. It's always better to prevent a problem than to have to fix a collapsed counter later. So, Ron, about how long does it take to install a countertop?
Oh, goodness. The timeline for installing a new countertop depends on a few factors, including the type of countertop material, your experience level, and whether additional prep work is needed. So here's kind of a general breakdown.
Sure.
With the laminate countertop, it takes about 6 to 8 hours if cutting and installing yourself. It's easiest to install if you have pre-cut pieces. It can be done in a day with basic tools. It requires minimal prep as laminate is lightweight. Quartz or granite countertops generally take 1 to 2 days. Pro installation is recommended. Stone countertops require precise measurements and cutting, often done professionally. Installation takes several hours, including leveling and sealing. You may need 24 hours for adhesive to cure before use. For butcher block or wood countertops, you should block out at least 8 to 12 hours. This requires oiling and sealing before use. It can be a do-it-yourself project, but requires exact cuts. Now, concrete countertops take anywhere between 3 and 5 days, including curing time. Custom-made concrete needs molding, pouring, and curing, which takes several days. Installation time alone can be a full day. Now, if you're doing this yourself, budget at least a full day for removal, installation, and cleanup. For professional installation, most companies can finish in a single day, but additional time may be needed for curing and sealing. Also, if you're installing a new sink or faucet, allow extra time for plumbing connections and caulking to prevent leaks. Now, Robin, can I cut my countertop without chipping it?
Yeah. Yeah, you can cut your countertop without chipping it. But the key is using the right tools and technique to ensure that clean, chip-free cut. Different countertop materials require different approaches. Like you saw with us, for laminate, you want to use a circular saw with a fine-tooth blade designed for laminate. Tape the cut line with painter's tape before cutting to reduce chipping. Cut from the back side of the laminate to prevent the saw teeth from chipping the top surface. Go slow and use a steady, even pressure. For butcher block, use a fine-tooth blade and cut slowly to avoid tearing the wood grain. Apply masking tape or painter's tape over the cut line to prevent splintering. Sand the edges after cutting for a smooth finish. Now for quartz or granite, you'll use a diamond blade on a wet saw. Cut outdoors or in a well-ventilated area, as stone dust is hazardous. So go slow and keep the blade wet with a water cooling attachment to prevent overheating. Here's a bonus tip. If you're working with a highly visible edge, consider practicing on a scrap piece first to ensure a perfect technique. Now let's recap what we've learned today. We started by removing the old countertop, including shutting off the water, disconnecting the plumbing, and safely lifting it out. Then we moved on to measuring and cutting the new countertop, making sure to dry fit everything before securing it. After that, we joined the countertop pieces together using adhesive and laminate joining bolts for a strong connection. We installed and secured the countertop to the cabinets, cut out the sink opening, and installed the new sink. Finally, we installed a backsplash, edged and sealed the countertop, giving it that clean, finished look that's water resistant and durable. We also discussed the tools and materials needed for this project, as well as answered some of your frequently asked questions. Whew,
Man, that was a lot.
it was.
So I want to take a minute to thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions not covered in this workshop, you can email us at workshopslive@homedepot.com or visit homedepot.com for more resources.
And remember, with the right tools and a little patience, you can tackle almost any home improvement project. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next workshop.